My fiancé cheated with my younger sister for over a year and got her pregnant 1 week before our wedding. Now he came back destroyed because she never loved him, and the son wasn't even his. I'm 31 years old. I work in accounting for a mid-sized firm, and it's been 2 years since I've spoken to most of my family. I know that sounds dramatic, but when I tell you what happened, you're going to understand why. The thing is, I was about to get married, literally 1 week away from my wedding, when my world fell apart in the most horrible way you can imagine. And no, I'm not exaggerating, because what my fiancé and my younger sister did to me was something I will never, ever be able to forgive, no matter how many people tell me I should be the bigger person and let go of the resentment or whatever. Let me start from the beginning so you understand the whole story. I met Steven when I was 18. We were in college. He was studying engineering and I had just started accounting. We became friends first, the kind who sit together in the cafeteria and share notes. And like a year later, we started dating. He was my first serious boyfriend. And honestly, I thought he was going to be the only one. Steven was everything I wanted at that time. He was fun, ambitious. He treated me well. Or at least that's what I thought. My parents adored him. My sister Brooke liked him a lot too. Whenever he came to the house, she'd get excited because Steven made her laugh and paid attention to her. Brooke is 6 years younger than me, so when Steven and I started dating, she was like 13 years old, basically a kid. We were together for 12 years before he proposed. 12 years. Can you believe it? I mean, I wasn't one of those people who pressures to get married quickly or anything like that, but after a decade together, I was like, well, I guess at some point we're going to take the next step, right? Steven always said he wanted to wait until we had financial stability, until we bought a house, until he got that promotion. There was always something. But finally, when I was 29, he proposed at a nice restaurant. Nothing super elaborate, but it was special to us because that's where we'd had our first official date. I cried, obviously, and said yes immediately. My parents were happy, my friends were happy, Brooke was happy, everyone was excited. We started planning the wedding, almost right away, because we didn't want to wait anymore. We set the date for a year later and got started organizing everything. Wedding planning was intense. I'm not going to lie. I was working full-time and also trying to coordinate the venue, catering, invitations, the dress, everything. Steven was supposedly helping me, but the truth is, I did like 80% of the work. He just showed up to approve or disapprove things. Brooke, who at that time was 25 and worked in marketing for a small company, offered to help me with some things, like decorations and centerpieces. I thought it was sweet of her, like a sister bonding moment. We spent quite a bit of time together. Those months, going to stores, trying cakes, all those things you do when you're planning a wedding. She and Steven. I also saw each other often because obviously he'd come to the family house when we were going to discuss details with my parents or show them samples of things. About 3 months before the wedding, I started to notice Steven was acting weird. I couldn't explain to you exactly what it was, but there was something different about him. He'd come home late, his phone would ring at odd hours, and he'd rush to silence it. Sometimes he'd cancel plans we had to see his friends or because he said he had extra work. I asked him a couple times if everything was okay, and he'd tell me yes, that he was just stressed with work and the wedding, that it was normal. And I believed him. I mean, why wouldn't I believe him? We'd been together for over a decade. I thought he knew me, that I knew him, that we had that trust. How stupid I was, right? Brooke was also a bit distant those last few months, but I thought it was because she was busy with her work. I didn't give it much importance. We kept seeing each other for wedding stuff, but it wasn't as frequent as before, and when we were together, she was kind of distracted, always checking her phone, smiling to herself. Once I asked her if she was dating someone and she got all nervous and said no, that it was just a guy from work she liked, but nothing had happened. I told her to tell me more, but she changed the subject super fast. 1 week before the wedding, Steven asked me to meet up to talk. He said it was important. I thought maybe he wanted to discuss something about the honeymoon or about moving in together after we got married. I don't know. Normal couple stuff when you're about to get married. We agreed to meet at our apartment, well, the apartment we were going to share after the wedding, but where he had already started leaving some things. When I got there, Steven was sitting on the couch with his head in his hands. He looked terrible, like he hadn't slept in days. I got scared. I thought something horrible had happened, that someone had died or that he was sick or something. I sat next to him and asked him what was wrong, and he just looked at me without saying anything. Like 5 minutes of pure awkward silence passed until he finally spoke. He told me, "I need to tell you something, and you're going to hate me, but I can't marry you without you knowing." And that's when everything went to hell. He told me he'd been having an affair. For a second, just for a second, I thought maybe we could get through it. You know, that he'd tell me it was a one-night mistake, that he was sorry, that it would never happen again. But then he said the name. Brooke. My sister, Brooke. I don't remember exactly what I felt in that moment because I think my brain completely shut down. It was like the words didn't make sense. Like Stephen was speaking another language. I asked him to repeat what he'd just said, thinking I'd heard wrong. And he repeated it. He told me he'd been having an affair with Brooke for over a year. A year. More than a year. Since before he proposed to me. And then, as if that wasn't enough, he told me Brooke was pregnant. 3 months pregnant. With his baby. I sat there, staring at him, unable to process what he was telling me. He kept talking, saying he was so sorry, that he never planned for it to happen, that it just happened, that Brooke and he had connected in a way they didn't expect, that he loved me, but he also loved her, that he was confused. All that typical shit people say when they want to justify the unjustifiable. And I could only think, this can't be happening. This has to be a nightmare. I'm going to wake up any moment. But I didn't wake up. It was real. My fiancé, with whom I'd spent 12 years of my life, had been sleeping with my younger sister, and now she was pregnant with his child. I don't know how much time passed before I could speak. Finally, I asked him if my parents knew. He said no, that nobody knew except the two of them. I asked him what he expected me to do with this information. He told me he didn't know, that he just felt like I deserved to know before the wedding, that he couldn't lie to me and marry me knowing what he'd done. How noble of him, right? Waiting until 1 week before to destroy my life instead of doing it on the wedding day. I got up from the couch and left. I didn't cry, I didn't scream, I didn't throw things at him, I just left. I drove to my parents' house because I needed to tell them the wedding was being canceled, though I wasn't planning to tell them why, at least not yet. But when I got there, Brooke was there. We saw each other, and something in her face told me she knew Stephen had told me. My parents were in the kitchen, and before I could say anything, Brooke started crying and saying she was so sorry, that she didn't plan to fall in love with Stephen, that it just happened, that she loved me but she also loved him. That's when I exploded. I yelled horrible things at her. I told her she was a traitor. A bitch, how could she do that to me? That she was my sister, that she was supposed to take care of me, not destroy me. My parents didn't understand anything. They were in shock trying to process what was happening. My mom started crying. My dad went pale. Brooke kept saying she was sorry, that she didn't want to hurt me, but she couldn't help what she felt. And I told her to go to hell. That I never wanted to see her again. That to me she was dead. I canceled the wedding that same night. I had to call the venue, the catering, the photographer, everyone. We lost thousands of dollars in deposits they wouldn't refund. My parents tried to talk to me, to make me see reason, saying Brooke was pregnant, that she needed support, that this was difficult for everyone. And I couldn't believe what I was hearing. Difficult for everyone? Difficult for her? She was the one who had betrayed me in the worst possible way, and my parents were worried about her, not about me. The following months were a nightmare. I had to tell everyone why the wedding was canceled. Some people were understanding. Others started distancing themselves as if what happened was contagious or something. My friends supported me. At least the real ones. I obviously stopped talking to Stephen, blocked his number, his social media, everything. I did the same with Brooke. My parents kept calling me, sending me messages, asking me to come talk to them, that we needed to resolve this as a family, but I didn't want to resolve it. There was nothing to resolve. To me, Brooke stopped being my sister the day she decided to sleep with my fiancé. About 6 months after all that, my parents called to tell me Stephen and Brooke were getting married, that they wanted me to come to the wedding. Can you believe it? They were inviting me to my ex-fiancé's wedding to my sister. I told them not a chance, that if they attended that wedding, they were also dead to me. My mom started crying, saying I couldn't ask them not to go, that Brooke was their daughter, that the baby was going to be their grandchild, that they couldn't lose both of us. And I told her then they'd chosen her or me. They couldn't have both. They attended the wedding. I haven't spoken to them since. 2 years passed. 2 years in which I rebuilt my life from scratch. I got a better job. I moved to a smaller apartment, but all mine. I started therapy. I made new friends. I went out with a couple of guys, though nothing serious. I don't know if happy is the right word, but I was okay. I was at peace with my decision to cut all those toxic people out of my life. I didn't miss them. Or at least that's what I told myself. About 3 months ago, someone knocked on my door on a Saturday morning. I opened without looking through the peephole because I was expecting a package. It was Steven. He looked terrible, much worse than the last time I saw him. He'd lost weight, had dark circles under his eyes, looked like he hadn't shaved in weeks. I stood paralyzed at the door, not knowing what to do. He started talking immediately, saying he needed to talk to me, to please give him 5 minutes, that it was important. I told him to leave, that I had nothing to talk to him about. But he insisted, almost begging, and something in his voice made me hesitate. Against my better judgment, I let him in. He sat in my living room and started crying. Like really crying. Not just a few tears, but full sobs. He told me he'd made the worst mistake of his life, that he missed me every day, that he ruined the best thing he had, that he knew he didn't deserve my forgiveness, but he needed to ask for it anyway. I told him he was 2 years too late with that speech and he could leave. But he kept talking. He told me Brooke had cheated on him, that she'd had an affair with her boss for 4 years. 4 years. The entire time they'd been together, even before she got pregnant. And the best part of all, the baby wasn't Steven's. It was the boss's. I couldn't help it. I laughed. I laughed in his face. It was a bitter laugh, almost hysterical, but it was genuine, I told him. So now you know what it feels like, right? Now you understand what you did to me. And he looked at me with those sad eyes like expecting me to feel sorry for him. He told me he'd gotten a paternity test because something didn't add up, that the child, David, who was now like a 1.5 years old, wasn't his. That Brooke had confessed everything, that her boss was a married man who had promised he'd leave his wife but never did, that she'd loved him all this time and that Steven had only been, and this is literally what he told me, a backup plan. I asked him why he was telling me all this. He said because he realized now what he'd done to me, how I felt, the betrayal and pain, and that he wanted me to know he was truly sorry. Not like that time 2 years ago when he still didn't understand the magnitude of what he'd done. I told him I was glad Brooke had done the same to him, that he deserved exactly that and worse, that karma existed and it was his turn. He started saying maybe we could try again, that we'd spent so much time together, that we were good together, that he'd learned his lesson. I looked at him like he was crazy. I told him, Steven, do you really think there's any chance I'd get back together with you after what you did to me? Do you think that because now you also feel betrayed somehow? That puts us on the same level? You chose to destroy what we had. You chose my sister. You chose all of this. That it turned out badly for you now is your problem, not mine. I told him to leave and never come back. He left, but it wasn't the end. Like a week later, Steven's mom started calling me. I didn't even know she had my new number. I guess Steven gave it to her. She'd leave me super long voicemails saying please talk to her son, that he was devastated, that he'd lost a lot of weight, that he wasn't sleeping, that she was worried about his mental health, that she'd always loved me like a daughter, that she knew what Steven did was horrible but everyone deserved a second chance. I didn't respond to any messages, but she kept calling. Every day. Sometimes several times a day. I finally answered and told her I was very sorry but I wasn't responsible for Steven's well-being, that he made his choices and now he had to live with the consequences. She started crying, saying please don't be so hard, that forgiveness was important, that holding on to resentment would only hurt me, and that's when I got pissed. I told her forgiveness was for my peace of mind, not for Steven's, and that I already had peace knowing he was suffering like he made me suffer. That if that made me a bad person, then so be it. But I wasn't going to lift a finger to help him. Steven's mom showed up at my house like a month ago. She knocked on the door and when I saw it was her, I almost didn't open. But I thought maybe if I talked to her in person, she'd understand I wasn't going to change my mind. I let her in, offered her water because she looked older and tired. She sat in my living room and started with the same speech, that Steven was really bad, that he'd started going to therapy but wasn't getting better, that she felt he needed my forgiveness to be able to heal, that if I could just talk to him, just once, maybe that would help him. I told her as calmly as I could that I understood she was worried about her son, and that as a mom she wanted to protect him and help him, that I didn't blame her for that, but that I didn't owe Steven anything. That what he did didn't just destroy our relationship, but also my relationship with my family, my trust in people, my ability to open up emotionally with someone, that I'd spent 2 years working on myself, on healing, on moving forward, and that I wasn't going to take a single step back for him, that if Steven needed help, there were professionals for that, friends, family, but that I wasn't going to be part of his healing process. She looked at me with tears in her eyes and asked me if I had no compassion, if I couldn't see that Steven was genuinely sorry. And I told her he probably was sorry, but that didn't change anything. That being sorry didn't erase what he did. That there were actions that simply couldn't be forgiven, not because the person who committed them didn't deserve forgiveness in a general or spiritual sense, but because the person who was hurt had every right to decide they didn't want to give that forgiveness. That was my right and I was going to exercise it. She left after that and hasn't come back. Steven sent me a message like 2 weeks ago. It said something like, "I understand you don't want to see me or talk to me, and I respect that. I just want you to know that what I did to you was the worst thing I've done in my life, and I'll never stop regretting it. I don't expect your forgiveness, but I hope you're happy and that you find someone who treats you like you deserve. I'm going to work on being a better person, not for you, but because I need to be. Thank you for the years we spent together. They were the best of my life until I ruined them. I wish you the best." I didn't respond. What was I going to say? Thanks for the message? Good luck with that? There was nothing to say. But I did think about it all for a while. I didn't feel bad for him. I want to make that clear. I didn't feel like I should have forgiven him or that I was too harsh, but I did feel like closure, I guess, knowing he'd finally accepted we weren't getting back together. Things with Brooke also resolved themselves in their own way. I found out through a mutual friend that the boss, when his wife found out about the affair and the child, decided not to get divorced. He gave Brooke a financial settlement with an NDA, basically paid her to shut up and not sue him, and she accepted. She obviously lost her job. Steven and she are going to see me and Scotted, proceed with the divorce, and supposedly they'll have shared custody of David. Even though the child isn't Steven's biologically, he's been his father these 2 years, and legally he's still the father until proven otherwise or he decides to give up his rights. I don't know all the legal details, and honestly, I don't care. My parents have sent me some messages these 2 years, especially at Christmas and on my birthday. But I don't respond. Sometimes I think about them. Obviously, they're my parents. But the reality is they chose to support Brooke knowing what she'd done to me. That to me was unforgivable. Maybe someday, I don't know, many years in the future, we can talk. But not now. And probably not soon. Last week, I went out to dinner with some friends, and one of them asked me if I ever thought about forgiving Steven or Brooke if I didn't feel that carrying that resentment was heavy. And the truth is, no. I don't feel like I'm carrying anything. I made a decision to cut toxic people out of my life, and that decision gave me peace, not weight. And maybe it sounds weird or even cruel to some people, but I don't owe forgiveness to the people who destroyed me. Forgiveness isn't mandatory. It's not something you have to give just because someone asks for it or because time has passed, and I'm okay with that.